Donald Trump cemented his place as Republican presidential frontrunner as thousands of Iowans braved bad roads and frigid temperatures to vote in the first event of the Republican primary season. It was a historic win for the former president. Broadcasters called the caucus for him around 30 minutes into voting. And now the three remaining Republican candidates are going to look ahead to the next primary event, and that takes place in New Hampshire. Joining us live from Iowa this morning with more on what the results mean for the eventual presidential election is Annie Bergeron-Oliver with CTV News. And Annie, we were chatting yesterday about the cold, but when I was watching last night, Iowans kept saying over and over, we're used to this. This is not unusual for us. And they really showed up. And I've already bored enough people this morning by talking about how fascinated I am watching the process of voting and counting. It's like watching somebody call lottery numbers. Obviously, we don't do that here in Canada. And at the end of that count...
Did you even see the popcorn buckets?
I saw the popcorn buckets and the grocery bags.
Some of them were doing popcorn buckets, but that's where they were putting... Exactly. It's very old school, very transparent,
yes,
and very community oriented. Totally different than what we're used to at home.
Yeah, and at the end of it, of course, Trump came out the clear winner. And really, this is sort of our first time seeing him at an official Republican campaigning event. He's done his own rallies, but this is the first official one. What did he have to say about his win last night?
Well, you know, Donald Trump in his speech last night obviously thanked his candidates, the other candidates in the race, and he said, look, I am the Republican candidate, and he essentially urged everyone else to drop out of the race, saying, look at how well I did. I'm going to be the next president, and I'm going to the White House. And Trump did have a historic win last night with more than 50% of the vote, just as polls had been suggesting for several months now. And I think there were a lot of people who were skeptical about the polls, saying there's no way Trump is going to get more than 50%, and if he does, it's a huge victory. And that's exactly what happened last night. So he now has this commanding lead in Iowa, wow, moving over to the other primary. And the other thing that he also did was some people are calling this sort of a double victory for Trump. Because one, he did get this commanding lead coming out yesterday, but the other thing he did was that the race for second is still very tight. And this is a good news for Trump because it means that the Republican Party is very divided, that he has his big group of supporters that are dedicated behind him, but the rest of the party is divided. And that means that there's a good chance he's going to continue doing well. And we saw that this is a really tight race now for second. I think a lot of people were surprised to see that DeSantis actually came second with 20% of the vote, whereas the polls up until caucus day had Nikki Haley at that 20% mark. She ended up third at 19%, but this essentially means that DeSantis is moving forward. He's going to the next primaries, and he now has momentum that maybe Haley doesn't quite have that she wanted.
Yeah, he just eked out his spot as the number two. New Hampshire, we've talked about this before, looks like it could go to Nikki Haley. So then let's take a look ahead to New Hampshire. What happens there? Is it sort of the same 1, 2, 3?
Well, New Hampshire is sort of a different boat than Iowa is. Just the demographic is a lot different. Iowa is largely a white population with a very evangelical base, which is very good for Trump, but also good for DeSantis. In New Hampshire, there's a lot more independence, a lot higher education. There's a much more diverse population, and a lot of people there are voting for Nikki Haley, and so she is surging in the polls. Trump right now does seem to be number one position, but Haley has a lot of support behind her, and Ron DeSantis doesn't quite have that. And I think it's telling because DeSantis today is going straight to South Carolina, which is a primary that happens the first week of February. He's not going to New Hampshire tomorrow or today as Nikki Haley is. Haley also was a former governor of South Carolina. And so again, that third primary, she is the one that has a lot of support. And so it will be very interesting to see what happens with DeSantis and Haley. DeSantis put a lot of money, a lot of time, essentially all of his eggs in his basket were here in Iowa. And it seems to have worked for him because he came second. He has a little bit of momentum. He's able to continue through. But the next two primaries that are coming up, they do look a lot better for Nikki Haley than they do for DeSantis.
Yeah, and also really interesting to watch that number two spot because whoever drops out, then you've got to figure out where their fundraising dollars go, and that could really have an effect on the campaign. Annie, great to talk to you. I'm glad you were able to stay warm and can't wait to catch up with you again. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Anne-Marie.
Hey, thanks for watching. If you liked this, be sure to subscribe here, or you can check out more Your Morning videos right here.